And welcome to the SmackDown Preview Podcast. I'm Adam Wilborn from WhatCulture, joined by the Dadley Boyz of WhatCulture, Michael Hamflett and Michael Sidgwick, to look ahead to tonight's episode of SmackDown on Fox. Well, before we get into it, if you're a fan of this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to WhatCulture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast from, for daily wrestling podcasts, where you not only review SmackDown and Raw, but also the Wednesday night war between AEW and NXT, pay-per-views. We have interviews, roundtable discussions, and a roundup of the week, complete with a bloody good quiz, of course, on WrestleCulture. But as I said, joined by Michael Hamflett and Michael Sidgwick to discuss tonight's SmackDown. And let's start with the most obvious question coming off the back of last week's SmackDown. What the hell has happened to Daniel Bryan?
He's your favourite wrestler, Sidgwick. Do you want to take this one first?
Yes.
I love the fact you sighed, by the way, as I introduced
just before Sidgwick talks about Daniel Bryan, yesterday, all of us in celebratory mood in the office, as everybody was celebrating their Spotify wrapped lists and that WhatCulture podcast graphic appeared, I could not have been happier with everybody. Like, I'd see more and more on it every day if I could. So I'm wary that we start doing this SmackDown preview every week and just be like, don't watch this crap, everybody. Go do something different with your Friday night. Don't spend Saturday morning, if that's your time you watch it. I do worry about this just becoming this weekly cynicism fest because this show is turgid. But what on earth happened to Daniel Bryan? I don't know, because he can't have been under the ring for a week, shaved bald. So what else has happened to Daniel Bryan? It's ridiculous.
I believe shaved is the expression. He's been shaved. There's some hair from an area of his body that is yet to be determined has been shaved off by the Fiend Bray Wyatt.
Torn off, not shaved off. Torn off, by the looks of things.
Well, obviously just got a bag of pubes that were hidden previously underneath the ring, and the Fiend Bray Wyatt has found it and just started picking out the bits of hair and just putting them on the ring symbolically. It's a symbolic...
It's symbolics.
Yeah. It's a symbolic visual of the fact that the new Daniel Bryan, he's already called the new Daniel Bryan, the newer Daniel Bryan is a newer man. Cynicism aside, right? I touched on this yesterday, I believe it was. If he comes out and he's the American Dragon all over again, I'm going to pop my tits off. They're going to just fly and splatter across every room in my house. I'm going to love it. And then I think about it and I think, oh, mint, 2006... ROH Daniel Bryan in WWE. This should be good. It's the Vince McMahon in Bruce Pritchard SmackDown show. I don't really think we're going to see the best version of the American Dragon. In fact, I think if, after he's done with The Fiend, if in fact it is the American Dragon, it's going to transition into a feud with Baron Corbin, and you're going to see Spyro the Bastard Dragon on that Titantron, because maybe the American Dragon doesn't breathe fire the same way he used to. This is where everything leads to. Titantron bollocks.
When you mentioned Bray and the bag of pubes, I wasn't thinking about the new Daniel Bryan. I was thinking of the old Bray Wyatt and that bucket of bolognese that he poured on Finn Balor once. What's that acidic viscous liquid? Like, we're there with Bray as well. This is not just a Daniel Bryan problem. This is not just us thinking, well, if he doesn't come back shaved, what was he doing to him under that ring? This is, why was Bray doing this thing to him under that ring? This is not in keeping with the Fiend's. For everything that the Fiend did to Seth Rollins, for example, this isn't even in keeping with that. Like, what he tried to do with Seth Rollins was systematically break him down. He saw a man that was on the edge and he thought, I can capitalize on this. Like, it was Seth's demons as well as Bray's kind of coming together, and he took his title from him. This is just like a weird physical assault. This is a kink rather than some sort of a move that he's going to psychologically unpick him.
There is a grand unified theory on what the Fiend's MO is.
It's Bray. There's always grand unified theories, man. It's Bray.
I know. And I'm not saying this is sustainable, and I'm not saying it's even accurate so far, because the legends are still the legends. So basically, here's what the theory is. I can't remember who's presented it or first posited it. I apologize. But Seth Rollins, when he encountered the Fiend, he turned heel because he wasn't the same man. Mm-hmm. Finn Balor had to retreat from wrestling altogether, and he was reborn in NXT as a new man, a new character. Daniel Bryan no longer has hair, and it's kind of it's kind of the same thing. It's kind of the same thing if in fact we get that, even if it's not the American Dragon, a version of that just awesome 2012 badass with the shaven head. That would be enough for me. So this is the theory, that Bray Wyatt is such a unknowable, horrific force that he changes your very DNA as a person when you encounter him. But Mick Foley's still the same. He attacked Mick Foley. That doesn't hold water to the theory. Jerry Lawler's still a pervert, as far as I'm aware.
Still a bigger fiend than Bray Wyatt himself.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So there's holes in this. Maybe legends are immune to it. Maybe in becoming legendary, it's like a final form.
Which, like, therefore tacitly relegates Daniel Bryan to being just one of the norms rather than a legend himself.
Indeed. But maybe the legends are like solidified as such. They're in their final form, so they are unaffected by Bray Wyatt's powers. I can't say any of this. I mean, I get it. I don't think they do long-term storytelling.
They did build this into SmackDown last week. People haven't been the same since they've encountered the Fiend. Yeah, they did.
Indeed. So if maybe when being too facetious and they've got a big long-term plan in place. Who knows? We'll see tonight.
Do you think if we do see a transformed Daniel Bryan, whether it's the American Dragon or whatever, that increases his odds of taking the title away from the Fiend at TLC?
If we're not being facetious about it, which is impossible on the preview podcast, and I think it's become a bit of a gimmick, which I greatly enjoy.
We've got lots more to come, by the way.
It thrills me.
We are ready for a good time. We're doing what WWE ask us to do now with SmackDown.
I forgot the bloody question now.
Do you think that it increases the chance of Daniel Bryan becoming champion?
Without being facetious, like wrestling fans, like I just look at neon gear and I'm slack-jawed. I can go back on the network and watch guys in neon gear and I'm slack-jawed.
Yep.
And what I'm saying is, if I see a newer version of Daniel Bryan, I, being a wrestling fan, am trained to believe in visual cues, and I will probably believe that he's got more of a chance. And again, if I'm not being flippant about this, if in fact Daniel Bryan versus The Fiend 2 is a ladder match, that's kind of the perfect stipulation for an imperfect Fiend character, because he doesn't have to beat the guy, he doesn't have to kill the guy who can't be killed or can't be hurt. All he has to do is climb a ladder bloody quickly and beat him. So I think it's genuinely quite an inspired... It's obviously an accident because it just happens to be December and that's when TLC is. But this could really work as a match. Daniel Bryan has got the intelligence, the keen intelligence to make a ladder match against The Fiend look halfway believable and dramatic that he could actually win the title.
I think that works for Bryan as well as it doesn't for Bray, though, because this is a man that, like, the lights go off and he laughs and then he teleports to the top of the ramp. So seeing him do that slow WWE cell climb, like where he's really tired, it's like this is a man that, like, once he's won the match, he's going to spring to the top of the ramp in 5 seconds.
He could just go blip.
Yeah, blip.
Like,
That's
to the
it.
top.
Grabs the belt, wins it. Like, everybody's out of there, beats the traffic. Like, but Bryan's trying to scurry up to win it. Maybe he puts him back in that sweet leather jacket he used to wear in 2011, because this Bryan would never normally wear leather, but now he's this shaved weirdo, so you can break all the rules of the character. I hate Bray Wyatt. Like, this is going to come up every week because Hell in a Cell allowed me to feel what I've always felt about Bray Wyatt all over again. I felt like I betrayed myself over
I
the
felt
summer.
like a mug.
Coming on these podcasts and just earnestly buying into Bray one last time after everything I'd felt about him, after all the grief that the likes of we would have taken for saying, yeah, this character's finished, and then they bring it back to life. I do feel like a fool for investing one last time, so I get quite a lot of satisfaction from burying this character now, because I remain like certain that it is dead and they're going to try and rehabilitate it month after month after month, and I hope Roman just punches his face off at WrestleMania.
I still enjoy the Fiend character to a certain extent, to be perfectly honest, and having said that, I can see a moment where Daniel Bryan is fingertips away from grabbing the Universal Championship. Lights go out, lights come back up, and it's the, what is it, $6.5 Fiend face belt that's up there instead, and we're not sure as to whether if he grabs that, is he Universal Champion or whatever. But let's move on. Let's talk instead about King Corbin.
Hey,
and Roman
let's get
Reigns.
Serious for a second.
He has vowed to humiliate Roman Reigns tonight on SmackDown. We've seen what that's equated to in recent weeks. Have at it. How is King Corbin going to humiliate Roman Reigns tonight?
Making him appear on this show? I'd be humiliated to be on SmackDown at the moment. What more? Like, what fate is worse in WWE than having to turn up on Friday on this brand?
Right. I think you're underselling the sophistication of WWE's writing and their ability to foreshadow themes and plots. On the Thanksgiving episode of SmackDown, Baron Corbin, and we've done this last week, but I'm still doing a bit, it's still quite funny, he mentioned dog food quite a bit, like rather a lot.
Yes.
Win a lot, yeah.
Win
he
a
could
lot.
realistically just have Vince McMahon, and this is very much the Vince McMahon show, because the executive director of it is Bruce Pritchard, who feeds into every one of his most awful impulses. Vince McMahon loves big, stupid visuals. This is a guy who... A big pile of dog crap appeared on Monday Night Raw once. So that was the TV 14 version of his sense of humour. What's the TV PG What's the PG version of that? Dog food.
Yeah.
There's going to be dog food on SmackDown tonight.
Is there going to be, because I feel like we're kind of due this, it's very cyclical, WWE, and they love to repeat old spots, and we've seen it with a variety of different things, and akin to the dog poop.
My mum was like that with dogs,
Excuse me?
Like whenever, just on the subject of dogs and repetition, just whenever one of the golden retriever family dogs died, she would just get another one. Just thought I'd put that out there, just spitballing. We're going to talk about Lacey Evans in 5 minutes. I'm trying to fill out the time.
That's kind of similarly how they rebuild Roman Reigns. They're like, what happened last month? Don't care. Just do a new storyline.
So is there a chance that, in amongst what we're mentioning here, the plan obviously backfires eventually on King Corbin, but he attempts to drop dog food on Roman Reigns, akin to when we've had paint and
we have had
you.
PG poo as well, and Vince said nothing is funnier than dog shit. So, like, to Bruce Pritchard, the man who will be sat next to you tonight, so dropping on his head. But the thing is, that never works out for the heels, even when they've sprung the trap. So I think it was the Spirit Squad once, they're like, we're going to get him this week. And then DX maneuvered them into position for it. So it never works out for the heels. So Baron Corbin could well rig the arena with big dog. And then somehow he's the one that ends up swimming in it in an awful, literally tribute to Vince McMahon swimming through the beer. It's Baron Corbin.
Think of the thumbnail potential
Of the front crawl through dump.
Amazing.
Yeah. Well, wrestlers at this point are swimming through the sewers, and they've just made a literal manifestation for it on television.
We will get back to King Corbin and Roman Reigns because I want to look ahead.
Because we can never get away from it.
Indeed. Again, I want to look ahead to TLC and the match they possibly could have. But before we do that, Roman Reigns is scheduled to face Dolph Ziggler tonight. How do you see that one going?
I read a quite incredible stat the other day, and it just made me feel awful.
Broke the day a bit, didn't it?
Broke the day.
Yeah.
Right. Dolph Ziggler has been on main roster WWE television for longer than Arn Anderson was an active professional wrestler.
What?
So
It says bumping on the marquee.
register this statistic and then wonder how on earth I'm meant to give half a toss about a main event Dolph Ziggler match on SmackDown in December in 2019 with an obvious outcome that's either a clean Roman Reigns victory or an interference-laden Baron Corbin victory in a feud that revolves around Baron Corbin and Roman Reigns and dog crap in 2019. How am I meant to give a toss about this? I'm not being the cynical
there is
dickhead.
no answer for that. Roman Reigns' matches on this Fox era SmackDown have generally been great. Like the Robert Reed match last week is like, I'd say one of the great underrated matches of this year because probably nobody watched it. Certainly anybody that saw highlights will never bother watching the whole thing. Rude, it's probably the best he's looked since NXT. Roman has this ability he's found it, should I say, since coming back from the leukemia diagnosis of just being able to pull this excitement out of, pretty moribund wrestlers like Rude and like Ziggler. And I think this will be great, but just how meaningless it all is, as Cedric's alluded to there, which is kind of...
I was pretty explicit.
Speaks to Ziggler's whole career. Like how meaningless all of this is will undermine that. Will undermine, just like Roman and Seth had that great match that was undermined by The Fiend coming out and running in. Like Roman does this most weeks, and so little of it matters that Ziggler could bump and put his back out like he always does for guys, and who will care? One segment later, especially when Baron Corbin does his dropping dog dirt thing from the top of the ceiling.
How do you salvage? Well, I'm sure we can go into more detail in this at another time. But how can WWE turn because obviously the network seems to be happy according to reports, despite disappointing figures when it comes to what they were speculating they were going to be getting. But certainly perception of SmackDown following the move, there was a great deal of excitement and obviously intrigue in the first few weeks when they just threw everything at the wall. And yet now we're talking about this. It's the worst show of the week by far. Raw is far, far better and more interesting than SmackDown. So how do you turn it round on Friday nights?
It's the Vince McMahon and Bruce Pritchard show. I mean, that's ultimately the only answer I can ever make to that question.
But how have they conspired to be in charge of what even feels like the B show?
Because they're two carnies,
Yeah.
two of the biggest carnies in the biggest carny industry of all time, doing great, effective carny things.
It's that theory that obviously Vince McMahon leaves NXT alone, so NXT is great. It's at the point where he's leaving Raw alone a little bit now and then, every now and then, like a Desert Rose. Raw turns out to be all right. Why? Oh, well, Vince wasn't there. He was doing XFL stuff. He couldn't make it. Yeah, it's depressing really as well because of SmackDown's placement on a Friday night, which is something Fox had to know from SmackDown's old life on Fridays, where it was previously at its most irrelevant. I think there's a struggle for the conversation to breathe because people have got other things going on the weekend, and those that aren't staying in on a Friday night to watch it, you know, and not really bothering to go back and catch up. So some of the storylines start, like they just start losing intrigue and interest. We'll plan this podcast on a Friday morning, and even WWE.com can't give you things to talk about on SmackDown. They're not planning things in advance because they know people are not really latching onto this sort of stuff. It's almost been an era of notoriety first. So if you think of things that have made headlines on SmackDown, ignoring the first couple of weeks with The Rock and Becky Lynch and whatnot, it's things like Shorty G and the Giant Dog. This is like banter era stuff that they're relying on for their headline shareable content. It's not good storylines. It's not great matches because then they're hardly in existence.
Is it just the time of the year?
No, because the intent of launching at this time of year was to catch all that sort of pre-Survivor Series buzz when all the brands are interacting, was to be the start of like a new season. Despite that this being the show that never ends, we're effectively 2 months into the new season of SmackDown, and like the December thing shouldn't count anymore. NXT and AEW are trying not to make the December thing count, so the main roster with billions of dollars on the line should be trying just as hard.
Very good point. Right, let's move on and talk all about Lacey Evans, because judging by last week's show, it appears that they're trying to turn her babyface. Thoughts, Michael Sidgwick?
I mean, I couldn't care less, but the audience seemed to be on board with it. So
thank you, Alabama, for that. Yeah.
Fair play to them. That's probably not going to... I mean, what's Lacey Evans like as a person? We have no idea. She's not a great fundamental pro wrestler at all. Not her fault because she was parachuted into this like baptism of fire. She's very good at projecting an inward personality that I expect is just not very nice. I've heard rumours of her apparent derogatory terms for certain marginalised groups. I get the idea. She's just so believable as like, oh, you're a bit of a dick, you. And I can latch onto that aspect of a character, not at in-ring work. So who knows? I can't see her getting over as a babyface at all. I mean, if you look at what WWE fans in the modern era, that remaining base latches onto, it's great work, genuinely likable personality. This is me just putting over my fetish for Daniel Bryan, but he remains the best illustration of this. People tend not to like very over-pushed office projects, as has been made abundantly clear by the last 15 years at least of WWE programming. This just feels like, well, we like it, pal. You should like it too. When's that worked?
Vince loves it, doesn't he? Vince loves it.
It's astonishing that they haven't had a plan.
To him, she's well worth the climb.
Yeah.
It's astonishing that they haven't had the plan for, okay, we're going to turn our most babyface in Bayley heel. Who do we have her face going forward after that? Obviously, you have the stuff with Charlotte, etc. But surely, at the same time as that is being suggested and pitched, you have to say, right, we've got to establish this other, opposite to a heel Bayley.
I mean, you've identified the second part of this problem. I'm such a Bayley stan. I should probably have a picture in my Twitter avatar, but this heel turn is not working. No.
They've
not particularly. I don't think it's all on her. Her performances haven't been fantastic on the microphone, and that Survivor Series match being such a disappointment is going to be the anchor around this entire title reign, I think. But I don't think the material's been that strong between her and Sasha Banks, where their
promo last week.
Their chemistry has often dragged rotten material from being like bargain basement WWE to something resembling passable. And last week's promo was really bad, not least because it was supposed to tee up a Lacey Evans promo. Now, did it work because they were actually chanting Lacey Evans in the crowd? Or was that one of those strange aberrations that you get in certain crowds? I think that remains to be seen. There was a moment in the point last week where Lacey Evans, they didn't really change her character. She was talking about being a homemaker in contrast to Bayley and Sasha, kind of having a go at the physicality of the SmackDown Women's Division. She said something like, I was cooking Thanksgiving dinner for 38 in-laws and stuff. And that got a pop.
Alabama, man.
In that crowd. And I sort of thought, I imagined myself like Bob Holly 10 minutes down the road watching her being like, now that's a woman. And I did sort of think like, how does that kind of crack travel when they travel themselves? How does that go in the Northeast? You know, how does that go like on the West Coast in general, like where more liberal audiences, which we're told still make up a sizable portion of WWE's crowd? I don't know unless they find an incredible way to tweak, as Sidgwick points out, what appear to be very real qualities of Lacey Evans into something likeable, how this feud works. But it's got to be Lacey Evans and Bayley at the pay-per-view, hasn't it? That's going to be a disaster.
They're best off hoping for a complete rejection of the Bayley character. And it's so uninteresting. Her character is someone who's basically just been browbeaten into a state of complete passivity.
She's not angry, she's sad.
Yeah, she's just sad. Oh, God.
Yeah.
You mentioned the pay-per-view there. We are 9 days away from TLC. It's been reported in the news today. The reason why we haven't had any matches announced is that effectively ticket sales and network subscriptions in particular don't really skyrocket until the final few days before the pay-per-view. So they don't really feel the need to advertise any TLC matches.
In their defense, right, I think a lot of this discourse has been quite overstated. It would be one thing if there weren't clear programs that the likes of us can sort of connect the dots, the ones who pay attention.
Like Stomping Grounds, because they only had a couple of really obvious matches that...
This is removed more so like from Hell in a Cell. I was kind of baffled as to what this card would look like beyond the main things that they had advertised. But yeah, I think it's been overstated because you kind of know that it's going to be Buddy Murphy versus Aleister Black, and The Fiend versus Daniel Bryan, and the Kabuki Warriors going to do something with Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch, etc., etc.
Rusev, Bobby Lashley.
Yeah, you kind of know the direction because they have actually been building things on TV that just haven't been explicitly advertising. We expect for this reason that's been provided. So I'll give them a pass. I will give them a rare pass.
But with that in mind, what sort of match should Roman Reigns and King Corbin have at TLC?
Kennel from Hell.
Yeah, go big.
Why not do the Kennel from Hell? If you're a new fan, you're going to just think the exact same things we did at 14, 15, 13 years old, however. Oh my God, there's 2 cages and Rottweilers. Big Boss Man has proved himself demonstrably capable of killing dogs. He might kill one on Sunday night, live, on pay-per-view. Newer fans will think this. Older fans will be like, oh yes, they realise this is crap. They realise this has literally been evacuated from a canine's arsehole. This is the quality of this feud. Let's lean into it. You're not going to get a classic match. It's just not going to happen. So let's just go big, and then we'll go home.
Get better working dogs as well. Like we somehow find ourselves in a time most... Like, this is a stupider storyline than the one that generated the original Kennel from Hell. There was charm somehow, I can't believe I'm saying this, to Big Boss Man feeding Al Snow his dog in comparison to what we've seen in the storyline so far.
Chicken.
It's just like this storyline is worse, it's sillier, and they can make this match so much better than the original version. They can somehow like make Kennel from Hell part of WWE canon rather than one big punchline. The cell is red now, so why not use a blue cage? And then it looks dafter. Get better working dogs that actually attack Baron Corbin rather than just looking really nervous whenever the Big Boss Man came in. Like, I bought that they were Pepper's family because they ran a mile when the Big Boss Man came along swinging that nightstick. But like, just put, you know, like slather some stuff on Baron Corbin's legs so the dogs actually go for him. One of the dogs turns out to be somebody in a dog suit. That's a nice twist. Like, there's no daft they can't go with this stipulation because this era services it somehow better than Vince Russo's Attitude Era. I can't believe I'm saying that, but look at the rest of 2019. Don't tell me that this isn't a more fitting time for a Kennel from Hell match than when Steve Austin and The Rock were both on top.
Big dog collar match is what we're probably going to get. It's been rumoured.
Loser eats big dog food. That giant oil drum we were talking about last week.
Yeah.
Win a lot. Anyway, right, let us know your thoughts in the comments section.
Who's a bit?
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And make sure you subscribe to What Culture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from for daily wrestling podcasts. Let us know your predictions as to TLC and all the questions we've dealt with in terms of what's happened to Daniel Bryan and what's going to happen with Roman Reigns and King Corbin tonight.
Tell us what you like about SmackDown, so maybe we can talk about that next week, because none of us can think of a thing.
It's fine, it'll be the TLC go-home show. We've got all that stuff next week. Don't forget, you can let us know your thoughts as well on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE Watch. There you can follow all 3 of us. You can follow Michael Hamflett at
Michael Hamflett,
Michael Sidgwick at
This is the most fun I've had all week. At M Sidgwick.
You can follow me at Adam Wilborn. As I said, follow us all at WhatCultureWWE. This has been the SmackDown preview. My thanks to the Dadley Boyz. Thank you for watching, and we will see you soon.